from her head to her toes of 8 inches. And wound 13 is another 5 inches itself below wound 12. Dr. Philo describes all of wounds 8 through 11 and 13 as pre-mortem, which is to say before death. He testified that wound 12 is most likely pre-mortem. Williams also had one head wound that can be said in isolation to be fatal. Wound 1, not depicted on the mannequin, is just above her left ear. The bullet came straight in and penetrated the brain's left temporal lobe. If this injury was incurred alone, it would have caused instant unconsciousness, and Williams's heart would have stopped beating within minutes. Yet the party's experts differ on whether the lethal shot to the head came after Williams was already dead. Dr. Philo classified it as post-mortem because it is non-hemorrhagic, not bleeding. Dr. Rowe, the expert for the defense, characterizes it as perimortem, meaning the injury happened around the time of death, but whether it came before or after the cessation of life, the legal definition of death, can't be determined. Dr. Philo did agree that the term perimortem is an accepted term of art in pathology, and it is not just a hedge for a doctor unwilling to opine whether an injury is pre or post-mortem. Dr. Philo's testimony that wound 1 to her head was sustained after death, after the cessation of respiration, pulsation, and all of her other vital functions, combined first with his testimony that after the other fatal wounds to the chest, Williams would have lived for 12 to 20 seconds. And second, with the fact that the time from the first shot to the last was about 20 seconds, essentially absolves Brelo of causing her death if believed. The very latest Williams could have sustained wound 1 to the head was during the 20th second of shooting, which is to say the last shot. Subtracting from that the 12 seconds at a minimum it took for her to die from the fatal chest wound or wounds, she would have been hit by those bullets to the chest no later than 8 seconds into all of the shooting. And all of the shots taken by all 13 officers, including Brelo, during those first 8 seconds have been deemed by the state as legally justifiable. Even if one arbitrarily cuts off half the minimum time Williams would have lived after the chest wounds from 12 seconds to 8 seconds, and still assuming wound 1 was made by the very last bullet fired during the 20 seconds of firing, that excludes all of Brelo's shots during the last 7.392 seconds when he did the shooting that the state's expert considers not justified as causes of wounds 8 through 13. I detail this timeline to illustrate the imprecision inherent in a medical examiner's opinions. I am not critical of Dr. Philo's qualifications and abilities. I believe no pathologist can say exactly when Williams's heart beat and breathing ceased. But opinions are just that. One person's conclusions about an unknown fact, based upon known facts combined with the expert's knowledge gained from education, training, and experience. An expert's experts' opinions can be the difference between finding something beyond a reasonable doubt and not. They should be examined carefully. Having considered Dr. Filo's opinion, I believe he's either wrong about the time from the chest injuries until death, or he's wrong that wound 1 to the head was post-mortem. On the one hand, his estimate of the time from the chest injuries to death is based on years of experience and a rough mathematical calculation about the amount of blood pumped per beat of Williams's heart. On the other hand, his opinion that the head wound was non-hemorrhagic and thus must have occurred after Williams lost pulsation is based on his own examination of the injured area of the head and brain. Yet, given the extremely compressed time frame, I find that the fatal injury to Williams's head came before her heart stopped pumping and before her life had ceased. That leaves Williams with 7 separate fatal wounds. 5 of them, 8 through 12, could have been inflicted by one shooter in one position. But if they were, the high improbability that Williams' body was contorted in such a way that she was exposed to those 5 downward shots and an upward shot to her lower abdomen and a straight-in shot to the left side of her head leads me to conclude beyond a reasonable doubt that Brelo caused at least one fatal wound to Williams's chest, probably wound 10, and maybe all 5, but that 1 or 2 other officers inflicted 2 other fatal wounds, namely 13 to the abdomen and 1 to the head. Given these facts about the wounds to Timothy Russell and Melissa Williams, I cannot find beyond a reasonable doubt that Brelo took the 4 gunshots causing Russell's 4 fatal wounds, any one of which would have caused Russell's death. I do find beyond a reasonable doubt, as with Williams, that he caused at least one of them. I find it possible, but not beyond a reasonable doubt, that he caused 2 of them. I cannot, however, as mentioned, find beyond a reasonable doubt which of the 4 fatal wounds he caused. In Russell's case, it is likely that he is responsible for 15C, given that shot's downward and right to left trajectory, and Brelo's likely spot on the hood, more or less between Williams and Russell, which put Brelo slightly to Russell's right. So, for both Timothy Russell and Melissa Williams, I have found beyond a reasonable doubt that Brelo fired at least one shot which by itself would have caused Russell's death. But proof of voluntary manslaughter requires a finding beyond a reasonable doubt, either that his shot alone actually caused the death, or that it was, to use the words of Justice Scalia from Burrage versus the United States, the straw that broke the camel's back. Dr. Wiens opined that each of the 4 wounds was fatal if suffered alone, and she described all of them, these are the ones to Russell, as ante-mortem, which is to say before death. Her definition of death does comport with the legal definition, which, as I mentioned, is cessation of life, the ceasing to exist, defined by physicians as a total stoppage of the circulation of the blood, and a cessation of the animal and vital functions consequent thereon, such as respiration, pulsation, etc. In other words, since they were pre-mortem, any of these 4 wounds caused the death, and not necessarily the first to hit Russell, since the time from injury to cessation of life varied depending on the wound. In the end, as to Timothy Russell, Dr. Wiens could not offer an opinion on which antemortem wound caused death first, leaving me as the finder of fact to guess at which of the 4 undoubtedly deadly bullets caused the cessation of life. Guessing and being convinced beyond a reasonable doubt are not compatible. Brelo's deadly shot would have caused the cessation of life if none of the other 3 were fired on Timothy Russell, but they were. And that fact precludes finding beyond a reasonable doubt that Russell would have lived but for Brelo's single lethal shot.